Good morning, friends. Good to see you for Sutta study with Bhante Suddhaso. We will be studying the second part of the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 137. Welcome to Gita, Michael, Jens, and Edward. Good to see you. Hello to Sarah and Ella, our European friends. And hello to Lisa as well. All right, so Michael has already some comments, and we'll get to them after we start analyzing the sutta with Bhante. Also, welcome to Galaxy. Hope all is well in Malaysia. All right, so we can invite Bhante to share some words of Dhamma.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Good morning, friends. As mentioned, today we'll be finishing up the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta. We had just finished the section on the three kinds of feelings. So elation, depression, and equanimity related to householders and renunciates, and how one can gradually progress through these towards awakening. So that was the section called Depending on This, Abandon That. And now we're starting the next section. So I'll read from the sutta and make some comments, and then we'll have questions and discussion at the end. So this section says, there are three establishments of mindfulness which a noble being engages in, which makes a teacher fit to instruct a group. This is what was said. What does it refer to? So just to explain a little bit here, so establishments of mindfulness is in fact the word satipatthana. But the word satipatthana here is being used much differently than it is in the Satipatthana Sutta and in the Satipatthana Samyutta. So this is a bit unusual in that I'm not aware of elsewhere in the suttas where the word satipatthana is used other than to refer to the four establishments of mindfulness. So this is, it's unusual that it's being used in this way in the sutta. And it says, these are the three establishments of mindfulness which a noble being engages in, which makes a teacher fit to instruct a group. So this is talking about the attitudes of a teacher, which makes it appropriate for them to be teaching disciples. So this is, you might see this as being the prerequisites. If you want to be a Dhamma teacher, then these are your three practices which you need to be committed to. And he does specify a noble being. So noble being is Arya in Pali, and that usually refers to someone who has attained at least the first stage of awakening. So there's the implication here that this set of instructions applies to someone who is at least a stream enterer and who is interested in having disciples. They should fit these three qualifications. So he says, here monks, the teacher teaches the Dhamma to his disciples out of compassion, seeking their welfare. This is for your welfare, this is for your happiness. His disciples do not listen, do not pay attention, do not try to understand, and they act contrary to the teacher's instructions. Monks, in this case, the Tathagata is not dissatisfied and does not experience dissatisfaction. He remains free of corruption, mindful, and clearly aware. Monks, this is the first establishment of mindfulness which a noble being engages in, which makes the teacher fit to instruct a group. In other words, if you want to be a Dhamma teacher, then the first basic requirement is you can't be bothered if your students don't pay attention to you. If your students are disregarding your teachings, they're not putting them into practice, They don't pay attention when you talk. Well, that's not a suitable basis for you to get upset. That's not a good reason for you to be displeased. That's just them acting out their own defilements. It's them making their own bad choices. So as long as you're teaching the Dhamma accurately and clearly from a basis of compassion, so notice here he does emphasize teaching out of compassion. So as long as you have that basis, then whether they choose to listen and pay attention and follow your instructions or not is up to them. Again, we may have had encounters in the past with teachers who, when students weren't paying attention, the teacher would get upset and irritated and annoyed or offended even, or the students would not bother to actually practice the Dhamma that was being taught to them. And again, the teacher would get annoyed or irritated. So in that case, that means that teacher is not ready for giving instruction. They're not ready to teach. So it's necessary to be willing to accept the possibility that your students might not listen to you, might not respect you even, and might not follow your instructions. Then the next one, it says, again, monks, the teacher teaches the Dhamma to his disciples out of compassion, seeking their welfare. This is for your welfare, this is for your happiness. Some of his disciples do not listen, do not pay attention, do not try to understand, and act contrary to the teacher's instructions. And some disciples listen, pay attention, try to understand, and do not act contrary to the teacher's instructions. So this is the situation where some of the disciples reject the teachings and some disciples take them up. And it says, monks, in this case, the Tathagata is not dissatisfied and does not experience dissatisfaction, and he is not satisfied and does not experience satisfaction. Circumventing both dissatisfaction and satisfaction, he remains equanimous, mindful, and clearly aware. Monks, this is the second establishment of mindfulness which a noble being engages in, which makes a teacher fit to instruct a group. So in other words, if some of your students are paying attention and following your instructions, and some of them are not paying attention and not following your instructions, again, the usual attitude of a teacher is to be displeased with the ones who aren't paying attention and to be pleased by the ones who are paying attention. But here the Buddha is saying, well, that's not proper either. One should not fall into either satisfaction or dissatisfaction, either pleasure at the good students or displeasure at the bad students. Maintain your equanimity, maintain your mindfulness and clear awareness, not falling into reactivity or judgmentalism towards the students. Again, recognizing that they're making their own choices. And as long as the teacher is committed to presenting the Dhamma accurately, faithfully, and compassionately, then that's what's most important. So the teacher, it's critical for the teacher to protect their own state of mind, not getting wrapped up in irritation towards the bad students or attachment to the good students. And then the third case, it says, again, monks, the teacher teaches the Dhamma to his disciples out of compassion, seeking their welfare. This is for your welfare, this is for your happiness. His disciples listen, pay attention, try to understand, and do not act contrary to the teacher's instructions. Monks, in this case, the Tathagata is not satisfied and does not experience satisfaction. He remains free of corruption, mindful and clearly aware. Monks, this is the third establishment of mindfulness which a noble being engages in, which makes a teacher fit to instruct a group. So here, again, this is the case where the Dhamma teacher is giving instructions. And in this case, all of the students pay close attention and make an effort to follow the instructions. But even then, the teacher must maintain equanimity, not getting elated, not getting overjoyed, not falling into any kind of reaction, because that reaction is once again arising from defilements. It's arising from desire. It's arising from obsession. It could be arising from self-centeredness even. It's like, oh, they're paying attention to me. How wonderful. They like my teachings. They like my instructions. So pleasure, in this case, might be arising from self-centeredness. So that also needs to be watched out for. So once again, the proper mind of a Dhamma teacher is to be established in compassion towards the disciples and to make a sincere effort to teach the Dhamma as well as you can. But whether or not the students take it up, don't be bothered one way or the other. Don't be either pleased or displeased. Just recognize that they're making their own choices. So the Buddha says, there are 3 establishments of mindfulness which a noble being engages in, which makes a teacher fit to instruct a group. This is what was said, and this is what it refers to. Then the next section, it says, of those who give instruction in practice, such a one is called an unsurpassable trainer of trainable people. This is what was said. What does it refer to? Monks. A trainable elephant is led by an elephant trainer to run in just one direction, east or west, north or south. Monks, a trainable horse is led by a horse trainer to run in just one direction, east or west, north or south. Monks, a trainable cow is led by a cow trainer to run in just one direction, east or west, north or south. Monks, a trainable person is led by the Arhat, the fully self-awakened one, to run in 8 directions. So here he's talking about some of the ways that the Buddha would train his disciples. And I should say there's a fair amount of debate, particularly around the first 3 of these. The next 5 are pretty clear, but the first 3, there's a lot of debate about just what the Buddha was referring to here. So the first one, it says, possessing form, one sees forms. This is one direction. So in Pali, this is rupi, rupani, pasati. So rupi means possessing rupa. So rupa means form. In particular, it usually refers to physical form, physical body. But it can also refer to physical objects that one sees. So having a physical form, one sees physical forms. And one way that this is understood is that this refers to using a physical sensation or physical object as one's meditation object. So for example, right now we can feel our body. And so we use a physical object as our meditation object. So for example, focusing on our hands or focusing on the breathing, or possibly focusing on an external object, such as a kasina image. So possessing form, one sees forms. So this is ordinary meditation, which most of us are engaged in. So starting from the experience of physicality and using physicality as a basis for developing mindfulness and concentration. Next it says, perceiving internal formlessness, one sees external forms. This is the second direction. So the shift here is that here we're perceiving internal formlessness. So the Pali is ajjatang arupa sannyi. So ajjatang means internal. Arupa means without form, no physical form. And sannyi is perceiving or recognizing. So one way of relating to this is that as one's perception of impermanence starts to develop and improve, then usually the first major shift that happens is that one's own body is no longer perceived as a solid object. And in fact, it can disappear entirely, or it can seem like a single formless mass of potential. an insubstantial field of possible matter, but not of anything solid or certain or definite. But there's still the experience of an external world. There's still the experience of something outside of ourselves. So this can be one way of relating to this. The next one says, one is resolved on beauty. This is the third direction. So this also is where there's a tremendous amount of debate about just what the Buddha was talking about. The Pali here is subang adimutto. So adimutto means to be resolved upon. And subang literally means that which is beautiful or that which is radiant. Some people interpret this to be referring to the nimitta. So some people, as they approach jhana, they start to see a bright light in their mind. So some people think that's what the Buddha was talking about here. Others think this is a reference to metta practice. So meditation on the beautiful is elsewhere spoken of as being focusing on the beautiful mind state of metta, of loving kindness. Another interpretation is that it's resolution upon piti sukha, so the rapturous, euphoric happiness that comes as one's samadhi develops. So as one becomes increasingly focused on one's meditation object, then there arises this powerful sense of euphoria. And one can focus on that euphoria as a way of catapulting one deeper into samadhi. So that may also be a way of understanding what the Buddha is referring to here. And also I should clarify, the second step, perceiving internal formlessness, one sees external forms. This can also refer to the case where one is so focused on one's meditation object that everything else fades away, loses its sense of importance or significance, so that one's attention is wholly focused on the meditation object. So, for example, I've often had the experience when focusing on my hands, the experience that my hands are the only real solid object in the universe, and everything else is this kind of vague mirage. But the hands are the only solid real thing. So that could also be what the Buddha is referring to there, is pointing to the experience that can happen where, as one's samadhi grows, only one's samadhi object seems real. And the rest of one's domain of perception starts to recede or seem insignificant, insubstantial and insignificant. Then the next four are the standard. The next four are the standard formless attainments. So as I mentioned yesterday, this sutta stands out as being one of the few, if not only, places in the suttas where the Buddha actually actively encourages practicing the formless attainments. Normally he mentions them, but does not encourage practicing them. This is one of the few places where he actually encourages practicing them. So the first one, he says, completely transcending perceptions of form, with the disappearance of perceptions of resistance, and with non-attention to perceptions of variety, perceiving infinite space, one attains and dwells in the domain of infinite space. This is the fourth direction. So completely transcending perceptions of form means one drops all concept of physicality entirely. So one completely abandons perception of the physical world. Disappearance of perceptions of resistance. So in this case, resistance is referring to the experience of a physical object resisting movement through it. So like when you press up against a wall, you experience resistance, the perception of resistance. Or sitting here on the floor, we're experiencing a perception of resistance of the body against the floor. The floor resists the body from moving through it. So abandoning perceptions of resistance means one is dropping the whole experience of objects resisting the movement of other objects. And non-attention to perceptions of variety means that one drops the experience of a variety of different kinds of objects. So it's opening up to the experience of unity, of everything being a single, unified, unvaried experience. So these three instructions are how one develops the experience of infinite space, the perception of infinite space. Then the fifth one, completely transcending the domain of infinite space, perceiving infinite consciousness. One attains and dwells in the domain of infinite consciousness. So the instruction here then is to, rather than focusing on the experience of infinite space, one instead is noticing that that awareness of infinite space is contained within consciousness. Therefore, consciousness itself is also infinite. So then one can move into the experience of infinite consciousness with no object other than itself. So this is an increasing refinement. So with the perception of infinite space, there is consciousness perceiving infinite space. So there's actually variety to that extent. There's consciousness and there's infinite space. So two distinct objects. With the domain of infinite consciousness, there's the experience of consciousness aware of consciousness. So increasing unification of one's mental field. And then transcending the domain of infinite consciousness, there's the perception of nothingness. So in this case, one is dropping even the concept of awareness or consciousness, and there's the experience of absolutely nothing existing. There is still awareness of nothing existing, however. So this is still not the most refined state of samsaric being. So then it says, completely transcending the domain of nothingness, one attains and dwells in the domain of neither perception nor non-perception. So this is the most refined of the formless attainments, where there is no mental activity happening at all, which is why it's called no perception. But the mind, nonetheless, is still awake. It's not asleep, it's still awake. That's why it's called nor non-perception. So it's neither perception nor non-perception. And then the Buddha says, completely transcending the domain of neither perception nor non-perception, one attains and dwells in the cessation of perception and feeling. This is the eighth direction. So the cessation of perception and feeling is attainable only through the elimination of sensual desire and aversion. So this is one of the more rarely mentioned maps to awakening that we find in the suttas. Again, it's mentioned only in a very small number of places. And it's through progressing through the formless attainments and then moving directly into the cessation of perception and feeling. So where one drops entirely the experience of perception and feeling. So this is, again, accessible only to a non-returner. But in a few places in the suttas, it's spoken about as though attaining that state of samadhi automatically brings about the attainment of non-return. So it's sometimes spoken about as a result of non-return and sometimes as a cause of non-return. So then the Buddha summarizes, he says, monks, a trainable person is led by the Arhat, the fully self-awakened one, to run in these 8 directions. Of those who give instructions in practice, such a one is called an unsurpassable trainer of trainable people. This is what was said, and this is what it refers to. This is what the Blessed One said. Satisfied, the monks delighted in the Blessed One's speech. So that's the end of the discourse. At this time, if you have questions or comments, we can go ahead and have some discussion.
Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right. Yes, we have a few comments. And James, good to see you. Long time no see. Welcome back. All right. So let me scroll up. So Michael at the beginning of the morning was saying, speaking of real equanimity, not to be confused with apathy. Thinking each of the four Brahmaviharas has a false partner, but I do the best I can on my way to the real deal.
Mhm.
In a way, it's the striving that counts. The word understand is a challenge for me because I easily confuse what my mind understands with what I think understand here means. I want to say it's the understanding of not understanding, an understanding deep enough to overwhelm, an understanding you can't see your way out of, beyond comparison. I'm rambling. Sorry, this sutta must get more than 2 days.
Yeah, so in a Buddhist context, understand means to have a direct experiential understanding of something. So again, I can describe to you Neapolitan pizza, but you won't understand it until you actually put some in your mouth. Then you'll understand. Trust me, that was my case. Someone described to me Neapolitan pizza, and I was just like, whatever. So it's like thin and simple. Okay. Mozzarella, basil, tomatoes. Yeah, sounds like pizza, I guess. But then somebody actually brought me to a place that served Neapolitan pizza and got me to eat some. And I was like, oh, okay, now I understand what you're talking about. Now I understand why you're saying this is different from American pizza. I finally got it. So it's the same. We can talk about the Dhamma all day long, but you don't understand it until you taste it. Then you understand. So I never really understood what the Buddha was talking about with impermanence until I started getting deep into the practice of the perception of impermanence. And then I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, when he said everything is impermanent, he actually meant it. Wow. Mind-blowing. Okay.
And Sarah says, can we say who we are is only based on how we interpret and respond to stimulus, both internal and external? And this changes everything we are with discipline in 6 sense domains?
I always get terribly uncomfortable with any sentence about defining who we are because there's nothing that we are. The best you can say is that there is currently a temporary combination of physical and mental traits which we think is who we are. That's about the most accurate you can say. So yeah, every single thing within body and mind is subject to change. And the mind can be trained. Just as the body can be trained, the mind can be trained. So we can train our minds to be completely different than it currently is. So that means we're not anything in particular, but there is a temporary experience, and that temporary experience can be altered through practice. Okay.
Sarah also adds, in the creative world, such as music or dance, a teacher can become very attached to success of students, which when you don't live up to expectations, it causes great suffering for all involved. And Michael says, this sounds like good stuff to keep in mind choosing a teacher.
Yeah, but we also need to be realistic about the fact that, one, awakened beings are rare, and two, exceptional teachers are rare. So you might have a less than perfect teacher, but you do the best you can. If you're still learning useful things from them, that's great. If they still have flaws, well, wish for them to become free of their flaws. Unless those flaws are obstructive to your practice, and then it's time to move on.
And Michael also adds, seems that if stream entry is a prerequisite for being a trainer, there'd be few teachers, unless we understand stream entry as something less rigorous than I understand it to be.
One, I do consider stream entry to be quite rigorous and rare and difficult to reach. Two, I don't believe this sutta is saying that only stream enterers should instruct. though of course that would be ideal. And actually there are some lineages in Thailand, which I'm aware of, where they do say that only stream mentors should be allowed to teach, but then that leads to some very awkward situations where basically if somebody opens a monastery or even gives a Dhamma talk, then people will take that as being an implicit claim of being a stream mentorer. So that gets into some very dangerous territory very quickly. It's caused a lot of problems. So I don't advocate for this idea that only stream mentorers should teach, because it does create tremendous problems. And I don't think that's what the Buddha is saying here.
And also, isn't the Buddha, sorry to interject, speaking about himself here?
Yeah,
like when he talks about the teacher.
Yeah, he's talking about himself. Yeah.
Yeah, he's not.
So he's presenting a very high ideal for a teacher, a very high standard. And for those who are in the role of teaching Dhamma, it's good to keep these three standards in mind. But yeah, I mean, he's the Buddha. He sets high standards. He sets high ideals, so that we have something worth trying to live up to.
And my interpretation is that because he's talking to himself, he's not really talking about like basically his disciples teaching others, but rather us being all taught by the Buddha, and these being the sort of prerequisites of pretty much what makes a Buddha fit to teach a group. This is how I interpreted it anyway.
Okay.
And so in that case, actually, it's not stream entry that is a prerequisite. It's Samma Sambuddhahood. And James asks, as a lay disciple, what is a good way to cultivate renunciate equanimity? That's very good.
By practicing renunciation. Just because you're a layperson doesn't mean you can't practice renunciation. Practice renunciation. Simplify your life. Cut out unnecessary sensual indulgence. Get rid of excess possessions. Simplify your wardrobe. Shave your head. Live as much like a monastic as you can. And notice how much better that makes life.
And James also asks, regarding the teacher type, should that be reserved to monastics only and not something the laity should do?
This is a controversial question, which is whether or not lay people should teach Dhamma. I'm personally of the opinion that 99% of the time the answer is no, they shouldn't. There are some very rare exceptions of some very exceptional lay practitioners with a very deep practice and a very deep understanding of Dhamma. But that's quite rare. So it's really important to keep in mind that the essence of Buddhist practice is renunciation. And if somebody is a layperson, the question that always comes to my mind is, what is it that you are not willing to let go of? So there's always that question. What is your hesitance in practicing Dhamma? And if one is unwilling to practice the Dhamma, then how can one fully understand the Dhamma? And if one does not fully understand the Dhamma, how can one properly teach the Dhamma? So I have, over the years, I've met a very small number of really exceptional lay practitioners who were really committed to living the Dhamma thoroughly and completely. And what that meant was that they were already living a nearly monastic life as a layperson. But those people are rare because they usually wind up becoming monastic sooner or later anyway. This is the reality of things. People who are really deeply, sincerely committed to the Dhamma almost invariably wind up in monastic life. It's just natural. So if somebody is not a monastic, that always raises a question mark. So yeah, I would say that at least 99.9% of the time, no, lay people should not be teaching Dhamma. No. And this is not to say that all monastics are automatically qualified to teach Dhamma either. To be honest, quite a number of monastics also shouldn't be teaching Dhamma. Yeah. But also sometimes you're in a situation where you do actually have something to share that will be of benefit to others, and you share it. And if that's done carefully and with deep respect for the Dhamma, then sometimes that's the right option. Okay.
All right. And Gita says, Bhante, would a Buddhist reading group and learning the Dhamma from the sutras okay? Learning together the teaching, but we have a guide in the group studying Buddhism, doing his PhD in Buddhism.
Well, first off, I would ask where he's getting his PhD from. If it's in the United States, I'm only aware of 2 places in the entire country where you can actually get a respectable Buddhist studies degree. So one is called Dharma Realm Buddhist University in Northern California, which is connected with the monastery called City of 10,000 Buddhas. And the other place is called University of the West, which is connected with the monastery called Shilai Monastery, Shilai Temple. So those are the only 2 places I know of in this country where you can actually get a real Buddhist studies degree. There's a lot of other universities which say they offer Buddhist studies degrees, and I've met a lot of people who have gotten so-called Buddhist studies degrees from these other universities. No, doesn't count. So if the person is getting their PhD in Buddhist studies in another country, I would have to know where it's from. But basic guideline is it must be directly connected to a highly reputable Buddhist monastery, which controls the curriculum and picks the teachers. Otherwise, I'm very skeptical. I haven't seen good results.
She says it's connected with Shilai.
Oh, perfect. Okay, yeah, no problem. Yeah, Shilai Temple is great. Very highly respected organization. University of the West, again, is great. Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. But I would still recommend that you also check in with some senior monastics about your understanding and just see what they think. Yeah, I've known various sutta study groups where like a handful of lay people get together and read suttas and discuss them. It's better than not reading the suttas. It's better than not discussing the suttas. But I found that it still tends to be a breeding ground for wrong view and misunderstanding. So always check in with senior monastics about your opinions and perspectives on Dhamma. And what I'd recommend with groups like that is to assemble a list of questions. So like you're going through a sutta, like maybe you're going through this sutta and you put together a list of questions like, what did the Buddha mean by possessing form one sees form? So you make your list of questions. And then on a later occasion, you go to a senior monastic and you say, in our study group, we were studying the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta, and we had this list of questions. What are your thoughts? So not just relying on the opinions of the lay people in the group, because that can be, again, it can just create an echo chamber for delusion. Sometimes it turns out okay, but often it doesn't. Yeah, so be careful. Don't trust your own opinions.
She also says this was a way to study Mahayana.
Yeah, which is also great. So there's not a lot of opportunities for studying Mahayana sutras, especially in languages other than Chinese. If you speak Chinese, there's lots of options. If you don't speak Chinese, there's very few options for studying Mahayana Sutras. So I think that's fine. But again, I recommend periodically consulting with senior monastics about what you think you understand of the sutras being studied.
Okay, and the last comment is from Michael, who says, over years I've been called upon to teach meditation. I've always begged off. Lately, I've got a little meditation group. I use metta mostly and meditation on breath. I try to stay clear of suttas. I ask myself always whether I'm staying in keeping with Dhamma. Am I okay with this?
It depends on how you're doing it. So if you're sharing meditation methods and you're saying things like, this is a part of Buddhist practice, and if you want to learn more, then you should go to such and such a monastery and talk with such and such monks and monastics, and you should investigate these books and these sources. So if you're encouraging people to learn more and study more and have a deeper experience with monastic Buddhism, then I think that's fine. And I would encourage, again, always make sure to point out to people that meditation is just one tiny fraction of Buddhist practice, just one piece. And that by itself, meditation practice is only minimally effective. It's meant to be taken as part of a complete path. If you just take one little bit, results are not necessarily going to be that great. Again, it's kind of like coming back to the case of Neapolitan pizza. You're like, well, what really makes Neapolitan pizza is the basil. So you just give me a bowl of basil, and I'm like, well, thanks for the bowl of basil, but that's not a pizza. That's a bowl of basil. So in the same way, you give someone some meditation methods, well, that's not Buddhism, and that doesn't lead to enlightenment. It's a piece of Buddhism, but by itself, it doesn't lead to enlightenment.
But it's still a wholesome thing. So it's very good that you do that and you share the teachings, however many teachings you can share to people who it's always of benefit if you have the right intention of compassion and caring.
Yeah, and sometimes you can seed words of Dhamma in people, which then can propel them towards a deeper Dhamma practice. Yeah, so do it carefully. And always encourage people to get in touch with monasteries, get in touch with monastics. Yeah.
And we have two more. Well, one is a comment, one is a question. So Galaxy is saying, University of the West is basically a circular university, but is supported by Fo Guangshan.
What is circular?
I don't know what circular.
Secular, maybe? Well, their main thing is actually business degrees. So most of the people who go there get business degrees. But it is, as I mentioned, it's one of only two places that offers a Buddhist studies program.
Bear in mind that Galaxy is in Malaysia.
Ah.
The degree in Buddhism the degree in Buddhism granted is academic and practice is not mandatory. I got my degree in Buddhism from University of the West 10 years ago.
Okay.
Secular, yeah. Galaxy meant secular. Then Kamese is asking, Bhante, how do we know which teachers are to follow? Any so-called criteria to know?
Coming back just briefly to Galaxy's comment, it is an academic degree. Same with Dharma Realm University, it's an academic degree. That's the nature of such things. The hope is that you're also practicing Buddhism, that you're not just getting the intellectual information, but that you're also practicing. So intellectual study can be a great support to one's Dhamma practice, but it is, of course, not a replacement for Dhamma practice. It's meant to augment and support Dhamma practice. What's the next question?
How do we know which teachers are to follow? Any so-called criteria to know?
Yeah, so somebody once asked a Tibetan Lama a similar question. They said, oh, there's all these different teachers and all these different traditions. How can we know which one is right? And the Tibetan Lama said very simply, he said, anyone who teaches the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path is worth following. Very simple instruction. Yeah. Yeah, so look at the contents of what the teacher is teaching, and if it seems to line up with what the Buddha taught. Does it line up with the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path? That's probably fine. If you encounter anything which seems off to you, check with other monastics. Say like, oh, well, so-and-so said rebirth is just a metaphor. Is that an accurate understanding? And virtually every single Buddhist monastic in the entire world will say, no, that is not correct. Rebirth is not a metaphor. It is literal, for example. Or if you notice your teacher is sexually abusing their students, for example, then you might check with some other monastics and be like, is this normal for teachers to sexually abuse their students? And virtually every monastic in the entire Buddhist world will say, no, that is not normal. That is not appropriate. So yeah, keep your conscience going, and always refer back to the Buddha's teachings, refer back to the suttas as your foundation. And if things seem weird at all, check with other senior monastics and see what they say.
Okay. And Michael also says back to what he adds to what he was saying earlier. I do that too. I mentioned Sila, Panya, and Samadhi. Is that okay?
Yeah. So you can also talk about what you feel comfortable talking about. But just, again, always make sure that you're referring back to Orthodox monastic institutions as the gold standard of Buddhist teachings and practice.
All right. And I think that's all for this morning. Thank you so much for joining us for Sutta Study. And this evening we'll have mug chat. So any questions that you have, you can bring them to us and we'll try our best to answer them. And then we will be taking a break for 2 weeks. So the monastics here at Empty Cloud will be going on retreat. The first retreat, actually, that we're fully taking since the pandemic has started. So we need some time off. So we will be disappearing for 2 weeks, and we will resume the live streams on the 29th. So July 29th. We will start again every Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So look forward to seeing you then, and hopefully we'll see you this evening as well. All right. We can end the morning with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.